Hi, welcome to the Creative Masterclass at Digital Hollywood, Spring 2021. I'm Catherine Clinch, and I'm very happy to see you join us. Today, we're going to be taking a look at a part of the media that has developed a much higher level of importance since the pandemic sent us all home. We're going to be looking at children's television and talking to three of the powerhouse leaders in that industry. We'll have Jennifer Dodge, who's president of Spin Master Entertainment, Seema Zagami, founder and CEO of Mimo Studio, and Ellen Doherty, who's chief creative officer of Fred Rogers Productions. So I'm going to ask each of these people to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about what they do, and then we're going to start having a conversation. So Jennifer, would you please get started? Tell us about yourself and about Mr. Rogers, Spin Master Entertainment.
Sure, I'm happy to do it. Thank you so much, Catherine. So as you said, my name is Jennifer and I'm the president of Spin Master Entertainment. And Spin Master Entertainment is one of three creative centers that make up Spin Master, which is the global leading toy and entertainment company. So we have three creative centers, one being toy, one being digital game, and the third being entertainment, of which I lead. And basically at Spin Master Entertainment, our job is to create, develop, produce, and distribute content across all screens. So small screens, kind of traditional television screens, and even feature film. We also manage the rights globally for many of our properties in licensing and merchandising, not just in the toy category where we are a manufacturer, but also in other categories of consumer products such as apparel and all those different areas that you can exploit in a kid's property. We currently have 7 animated series in production, several of which have not yet been announced, but we are most known for our preschool phenomenon, Paw Patrol. Paw Patrol has been we are in our 8th season on the air. I'm looking at Seema when I say that because Seema was a big part of Paw Patrol's story and history. So we're most known for Paw Patrol, which is our big preschool hit and success story. And we are also in production and about to deliver our very first theatrical feature film, Paw Patrol the movie, which will be in theaters in the US August 20th, which has a and we're extremely excited, for the property and for the franchise and for all the fans to experience the pups on a whole new level on the big screen. And for us as an organization, it marks our first, foray into feature film. And we did produce it ourselves. We produced it in-house. We had great partners with Nickelodeon and Paramount. And we're, obviously very, very excited and hoping that everyone's going to feel super confident to go to the theaters by the end of the summer. And then we have other, really great preschool properties that air globally. I think we're currently in, 190 countries globally, if you look at all of our different series. One of our latest launches is a show called Mighty Express, which is our first original Netflix property. So Netflix was our global partner, and we launched Mighty Express back in September. And we're also quite known for our boys action franchise called Bakugan. And Bakugan we're in our second generation of Bakugan. So Bakugan first launched back in 2008 and was a phenomenal success. We rested it for a few years and we came back strong with a new series and new toy line in 2019. And so we're continuing our production on Bakugan as well. And then we have a few surprises that are going to be announced over the next year to come on new properties. But that's basically what we do at Spin Master Entertainment.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Thank
Seema,
you.
why don't you tell us about Mimo?
Sure. So just by way of background, I left my 33-year career at Nickelodeon about 3 years ago. And, about 18 months ago, I started a company called Mimo Studios. It's a female-owned and operated production company targeting IP for kids under 11. We took a close look at the kids landscape and all of the things that have happened, as you said, Catherine, coming out of this pandemic. And we really think that the model was shifting before the pandemic, and now the model is really shifting post-pandemic. You know, kids and their families have a new set of values, really, you know, sort of based on the experiences that they've had. You know, the idea of like empathy and kindness and perseverance and, you know, sort of like individual growth. These are all going to be themes that are going to be really important to kids. And we're very excited to actually tell stories with a new set of tools to kids under 11. So we're making animation, preschool as a subset of animation, and live action. And the thing that we're trying to do differently is, because of the way that the landscape has shifted, is tell stories beginning with what we're calling TV-sized movies. So we really think there's an opportunity to really sort of begin the journey with a emotional connection to IP with kids by telling longer and richer stories to begin with. So if you think back to the Charlie Brown model, we're really trying to reinvent kind of how properties come into the kid space and the new ecosystem, because the new ecosystem has shifted so radically since in the last 5 or 10 years. So we have a great slate. We're very excited. We bought some properties that are based on popular podcasts. We have a property that we're working on called The Pout Pout Fish, which is a very popular preschool book. We think it's going to translate beautifully into CG animation. We have a great couple of stories we want to tell. And then we have a bunch of great, you know, live action films that are very kid empowering and very emotionally appropriate for what's happening in the world today. So we're really excited to be here, and we're excited to bring our, you know, IP portfolio to life.
Wow, thank you. And Ellen.
Hi, so I'm Chief Creative Officer of Fred Rogers Productions, which is the company indeed founded by Mr. Rogers in 1960 something. And we produce a number of series for PBS Kids, including Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, Odd Squad. We just launched Don Quixote, which is just like a week and a half ago, I think it is now, which is a new preschool show about a little yellow donkey with big dreams. It is on the theme of perseverance and resilience and problem solving. It's one of those shows that has, you know, we started talking about it in 2016 and got greenlit to series in the beginning of 2019. And now the resilience and perseverance, as we premiered this month, has really hit very differently, as Seema noted, about what kids and families are looking for now. So that was some very fortuitous timing in terms of the connection with the audience on that show. We're also doing Alma's Way, which is created by Sonia Manzano, and that's going to be launching on PBS Kids this fall. And that's about critical thinking and is about a Puerto Rican girl from the Bronx named Alma. We also have, let's see, those are the 4 series for PBS Kids that are currently in production. We also have a unscripted show that's in pre-production, waiting for the right moment post-COVID to really make that happen. And we really look for, I think we have kind of an interesting niche in the kids media space, because we're a not-for-profit company and we're very mission driven on creating content for kids and families that really focuses on the way we word it in the mission statement is modeling an enthusiasm for learning. So sometimes that is something that's very sort of curriculum focused in the way that Odd Squad deals with math. But it's also the social emotional skills and executive function that you see in Don Quixote and of course Daniel Tiger, and also in the upcoming Alma's Way.
Fabulous. I'm honored to have you here. It's fascinating to listen to what you've done. My sons are grown and mostly flown, so I haven't really done an in-depth dive into this area, and I was totally immersed in your websites over the past few days. I'd like to ask you first, what is the first children's show you remember when you were a kid?
Uh,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Ellen.
it's like, who's going in first?
You go.
Well, when you asked that question in the email first, I was sort of like, oh gosh. And the first thing that came to mind was Kimba the White Lion, because that was on when I got home from kindergarten. I definitely watched a whole lot of shows, but there was something I think about that because it was part of my routine in my day and I liked the adventure of it. That Kimba is one that sticks out, as well as, there's lots of other shows like Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street as well. But Kimba, that's what I got for you.
Very cool. Jennifer?
For me, the first show I remember was a Canadian series by the name of Mr. Dress Up, which to anyone who grew up in Canada was just beloved. He is this wonderful man who would draw and tell you stories, and he had these puppets out in his backyard who he would go and visit. And it was just very genuine and sweet and beautiful. And I think kind of like this like time of Canada, it's like just very iconic to us here. And then I think the other one, because really it's that and Sesame Street that I just remember at the same time being very young. And I really, really believe that Sesame Street like existed, that it was a place that you could go. And I wanted, desperately to go to. So for me, that's my kind of first shows.
Very cool. Seema, what about you?
I have vague memories of a lot of things, and I definitely watched Zoom when I was younger, but I think the show that had the biggest impact on me might have been the Brady Bunch. And that entire Friday night lineup of, the Brady Bunch and the Partridge Family.
Yeah.
And I think Love American Style was what we stayed up late for. That was like our SNL.
I remember all of those. For me, it was the Mickey Mouse Club. And then because I grew up in Manhattan, we had Sonny Fox's Wonderama and Soupy Sales. So if that's not a dichotomy, I don't know what is. But then I'd like to know, why did you choose to work in this area? Because when I first started out, I was at the Sesame Street Music Office in New York for a brief while. And then I was at Warner Communications in the educational division. And we were working with the beginnings of Nickelodeon. And so I was able to see it, but it never reached out to me and said, spend your life here, as opposed to all of you who did. So I'd like to know, what was it that drew you in and what kept you there? Jennifer, go first with you.
Okay, well, I really had just started working in the television business. In fact, I was doing kind of catering on set. I just, graduated. I was in my early 20s, and I started to kind of get to know some producers in Toronto, and ended up with a part-time job answering phones at a new kids entertainment company, and just absolutely fell in love with the whole idea. I had a wonderful boss at the time. Her name is Beth Stevenson, and she was the head of development and production, and became my mentor for 9 years. But when I saw I never had anything I really ever wanted to do. And when I saw what she did I knew, I'm like, I want to do what she's doing every day. And I always loved television growing up, and I wanted to be in TV and storytelling, and kind of just, ended up at the very beginning of my career in a children's entertainment company, and just knew it was perfect for me. And I've never looked back.
Wow. Seema, what about you?
So I'm sort of atypical. I think I went to school to study education. I switched to be an English major and thought that I would then be a writer. I worked for a small magazine, and it just wasn't fast enough for me. So I stumbled into the early days of Nickelodeon. And what I like to tell people is that I found a company where the product was amazing, or on its way to amazing, actually, in those days. The people were wonderful, and the company stood for something. And so because of that, I stayed, and I love the idea that I got there in the early days, because when I started, there were 25 people there. When I left, there were, thousands of people there. So it was an incredible journey. So I found somewhere that I could call home, and I really never wanted to leave.
Wow. What about you, Ellen?
Well, in college, I kind of had a similar communications journey, I'll call it, where I started thinking journalism or maybe advertising. And then when I got into it and I got to learn about TV production, I was like, oh, this is cool. This is all about making stuff. And I like to make stuff. And I took lots of script writing classes, and it just sort of, I actually don't remember how it gelled for me, but it became very clear to me. I guess maybe some of the projects that I did in school were for children. And my mom was a teacher, so that was the other piece that I thought about, being a teacher for that reason, but I didn't think that I wanted to be in a classroom. Like, it just didn't seem like that was what I wanted to do every day. And I remember my advisor asking me when I was graduating, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, obviously TV was a given, and something about learning stuff or like documentary wasn't a thing at this time in the way that it is now. Like, I don't think Discovery Channel certainly existed probably, but not as the powerhouse that it is now in nonfiction. And so I sort of said, TV and kids and something kind of educational, and so PBS. And I was not that prescient at that time. It just sort of, it was what I wanted to do and where I've stayed. And I happened to be able to do an internship on Reading Rainbow right after I graduated from school. And then a year later, when I was looking for work, I did not think to call them, which would have been really smart of me, but I didn't think of it. I went through the Sunday New York Times, as you did, spread it out on the floor and went through it inch by inch, and found a teeny, like really little ad that said assistant to the producers for a children's television production company. And I was like, oh, that's me. And I called, and it was Reading Rainbow. And what I love about it is that I get to learn stuff. I started off doing nonfiction, unscripted live action. And now I do mostly scripted live action and animation, humans and puppets. And I love that it's really joyful, that we bring joy to people, to kids and families, and also that they can learn stuff. And I think that's the long tail effect that, having been in the industry for a while, that I see and hear from on social media and meet people who've watched the shows and really, loved what they saw on Reading Rainbow, on Puzzle Place, which is another show that I worked on, or Cyber Chase, which was my last job, and now clearly at FRP with Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, which I'm only very adjacent to, but Daniel Tiger and Odd Squad and the new shows. It's just, you get to see, you hear from kids and people what the show means to them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to tell you, my oldest son is profoundly deaf, and Reading Rainbow and Sesame Street were the two vehicles that I used to teach him how to speak. So it has a huge emotional attachment to me, but I think there's so much going on in these programs that seem so simple, and yet they're just not. So what I'd like to know is, you've talked about buying IP and adapting that, and I'd like to put that aside for this part of the conversation, because I would like to know what the genesis of your original content is. Because do you start with a character or a theme or an arena or a toy? What do you start with to create the quality programming? Seema, do you want to take this?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Catherine, and I think it can start from any number of places. I think the makeup of great content is well-defined characters, really great stories. Today, some version of either social and emotional development, social consciousness, a little bit of curriculum. I think it can be any of those things. And I think that at the real heart of good storytelling are great characters and someone who feels really passionately about the story that they're telling. So every great story has, sort of like a great storyteller behind it. I'm working with another group of people at an organization called You Wish, and their tagline is, your story is your superpower. And I think that's a really special tagline, because I do really think that behind every great piece of content, there is one incredibly passionate person who's trying to bring that to life. And I think that, you know, it doesn't matter where it comes from, as long as you can identify who it is and know that, you know, sort of like they've thought through every single piece of what's supposed to happen next, from the backgrounds to the music to the, you know, sort of like the backstory of every character. And when you find them, it's very special.
The only animation for kids I've worked on is Rescue Bots. And I asked them, because it wasn't on the air yet, and I said, are there some pictures I could look at? And I got the little jump drive with everything on it. And it was the most fantastic educational experience I've ever been through as a writer. And by that point, I had written tons of adult TV. So I really respect this area. And what I'd like to know, Ellen, you're starting with Fred Rogers, who is the most beloved person on the planet. I mean, I wept my way watching Tom Hanks play him, wept my way through the movie, and, you know, where they're all singing to him on the subway. I mean, what greater tribute, and how normal that must have been. But you're starting with that and you're building out. And as I recall, Daniel is one of the characters that he used to use as a puppet, is it not? What about,
Yes.
what about your other programs? How do you create these things now that Fred is not there?
Well, I think that for me, one of the things that I think about is actually there's a quote that Fred gave in an interview that I have in my office. I don't generally quote him on a daily basis, but he said, he was asked, or I don't know what the question was, but he said, imagine being given an hour of television every day. You want to put something, you want to do something give something of value with that. And I tried to do the best that I could. And I thought that when I heard that in an interview that he gave, I thought that's really amazing, because that's kind of part of what's so interesting about, particularly, it's true with all media, people give us their time, we tell them a story. But with children, you're being let into the home in a different way. And parents are often the gatekeepers saying, yes, you can watch this. Mm-hmm. And I think that, you know, we do look for things that have some kind of value, which is a very broad term purposely, because there's all kinds. Great storytelling has value. It's not about a curricular objective. It's just great storytelling. But I think that, you know, sometimes we look for, or right now, really what I do is I look for people who are passionate about what they want to, the story that they want to tell. And if they can tell it, to Seema's point, passion is really important. Lots of people can have an idea that's similar, but the passion and the vision to get through, you know, 5 or 10 years of a program, 5 years to get to greenlight, maybe even, you know, it takes a lot of perseverance and passion to get that far. But I think, you know, we sometimes, just to kind of run through with Daniel Tiger, the company that was before I joined, but Kevin Morrison, who was the COO at the time, had the idea of animating the neighborhood of make-believe, which is where Daniel Tiger existed on Mr. Rogers. And the person that he went to was somebody who loved Mr. Rogers possibly more than anyone else on the planet, and that's Angela Santomero. With Odd Squad, it was PBS put out an RFP looking for a math show, and Tim McKeown and Adam Peltzman had the idea for Odd Squad as a result of that. And we really liked it because, first of all, it's a great show and really engaging and with a diverse group of kids. So that fits into the sort of Fred Rogers Productions model, because it is about this enthusiasm for learning and kids leading a story. With Don Quixote, that is also a character, which is the new show on PBS Kids this month. That's a character from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood as well. And that sparked from literally looking at a list of characters and laughing at Don Quixote and thinking that's pretty funny. And from that, the idea of a little donkey with big dreams being a great way to tell stories about perseverance and resilience for preschoolers crystallized. And lastly, with Alma's Way, Sonia Manzano came up with that. It's inspired by her childhood to an extent. It's a contemporary story, but also she wanted kids to know that they have a mind and they can use it. And that advocacy, self-advocacy for children is also something that I think is very true to Fred's legacy specifically, and the value of each individual and their unique special qualities.
It's amazing. Thank you. Jennifer?
Yeah, I think, always what every, I hope every producer will say, we're executive, it is at the end of the day, about the compelling characters. That really is what sets apart most shows. But the starting point and where that comes from can come from so many different places. So you can start with a great, published property and take it to a whole other level. It's just a picture book and there's not a lot of information maybe about those characters, but you can develop those and grow them out. And that they essentially come from areas and ideas and themes and characters and worlds that children genuinely love and are interested in and want to be a part of. And, with Paw Patrol, it's the puppies that is probably the greatest hook. There's so many other great things, but it's the fact that they're puppies. You can relate to that. Dogs have jobs in the real world. These are things that are relatable, that children can understand. They've seen firefighters and police officers before. They understand that concept. But then when you add the heroism and the adventure and the rescue, then you bring that aspirational side to it. So I think when you can have the entry point that's really relatable to a child's life, that they can recognize and they love and they understand, and then you can add something special and aspirational that gives that wish fulfillment. I think even my original example with Sesame Street, it's a regular neighborhood street, but then it has all these amazing characters that that is that mix of, relatable and wish fulfillment that I think is often part of the magical combination of what makes a really quality program. If you're telling stories, especially to preschoolers, I think we all feel that responsibility that there needs to be, whether it is social, emotional, or educational curriculum, that there is that value, to Ellen's point. Like, and value is such a broad word, but that when parents are, putting their child in front of something that affords them maybe an opportunity these days to unload the dishwasher or whatever, they want to have that trust, right? That they feel like what their child is watching is of value. And that can be from great storytelling or simple lessons about teamwork, perseverance, community service, or it can really be educational and have that real, ABC and 1, 2, 3 educational component that has a different level of value. So I think the ideas can start from anywhere, but there has to be something that is unique and special from a point of view. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to compelling characters.
Great, thank you. Seema, I want to go back to something that you were talking about before. When you said TV-sized movies, what does that mean? Are you talking about length or budget or just the scope of the story?
I think it's probably all three of those. I think that the lines are so blurry now between what a theatrical release is and what a streaming release is. And so we're calling them TV-sized movies because they're basically sort of like events for kids. So than anybody that, a Paw Patrol Christmas special is to a kid like as good as going to the theater to see a big movie. So I'm talking about 45 to 60 minutes where the story, sort of like is a slightly bigger adventure than you would get in a normal episode. And it's a longer, more fleshed out, sort of developed idea that they can maybe come back to and watch over and over again, that really starts to build an emotional connection, between the audience and the characters, that then is a starting place to move forward from.
Okay, thank you. And so what I'm also wondering are what are some of the traps that can cause a show that you think is going to be a surefire hit to stumble in the market? You're laughing, so let's go with you first, Jennifer.
I think it's trying to be somebody else's hit next, right? So I think that's like the first thing, is that you look and you see something that's working and then you try to make another version of that, right? Where you're like, oh, you know, SpongeBob really is a great show. I'm going to make something that's just like SpongeBob. Well, you can never make something that is just like something else.
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, we've all seen a lot of pitches in our lives, whether we're at a network or whether we're independent producers. And I think the biggest trap that people fall into is trying to replicate the success of something that is super successful in the moment, and not just, you know, coming at it from its own organic and original place. And I think not only we've seen other people fall into it, I know I've fallen into that, you know, trap before, whether you're trying to replicate your own, you know, your own successful properties or someone else's. I think that it's an easy trap to fall into, to try to be the next, you know, something that already exists.
How important is the element of merch and toys in this demographic? Because I am the mother that has pictures of my son in Barney pajamas, Barney slippers, holding Barney and Baby Bop with a Barney sippy cup in his hand. So been there, done that. But how important is it really? I mean, do you put on a show that doesn't have, when you have a toy division, do you put on a show that doesn't have a toy attached, or clothing, or just images, or how do you approach that? Let me start with Ellen, because you're in a lifelong brand and I have never seen Mr. Rogers merch anywhere.
Oh, there is some actually. I think, well, listen, you know, in public media, most of the shows probably don't have the most successful merchandising programs. You know, I think that some do. Daniel Tiger does really well, for example, and obviously Sesame Street as a cornerstone there. But I think that certainly it's a great way for people to be able to express their affection for the brand, and kids want to have the things in their lives. They want physical versions of what they watch in their media. If they love the story, they want to be able to hug their favorite character, right? So I think I think it's important from that point of view. From a sustainability perspective in public media, it sure does help to where we have to raise, as producers, we raise a significant portion of the budget. That's the merchandising advances and proceeds are very, very helpful, but they're not they're not crucial. They're incredibly helpful, but they're not a must.
Seema, do you want to, because Nickelodeon has, if nothing else, that goop that they used to have, forget what they call it.
Slime.
Slime.
You know, I would say that the properties, the true giant franchises that people want to wear on their backpacks and wear on their t-shirts and have their toothpaste on, they're so few and far between. So it is futile to believe that you need to think it all the way through before you begin. If you follow the audience's passion, then the merchandising should come with only the things that you know, sort of the once in every 10 years, that the properties that really sort of like skyrocket. So Paw Patrol was 8 years ago, right? And it's still going strong. And that just is a testament to what I would call a true franchise. Things like SpongeBob and obviously Sesame Street, and things like Dora the Explorer, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. There aren't that many of them that really have gone, you know, sort of like truly over the top in merchandising success stories. So it's definitely something that everybody thinks about, but I think if you are truly in the kids' content business, then the character and the story is first and foremost the most important thing. And then the other things then follow.
Totally. I totally agree. And I think even, you know, from my standpoint, obviously, as a division of a toy and entertainment company, you know, you'll be seeing, you know, some things coming from us that don't feel as obviously connected to, you know, kind of typical classic toy and merchandise, because it is, as Seema said, you can't, everything that you put out is not going to be a Paw Patrol. It's just, it's not a business plan, I would say, that would work.
If there was an answer or a formula, we'd all be way richer than we are.
Yes.
And, and
Yes.
it is timing and a little bit of magic and a little bit of just everything coming together at the right time. And, you know, there's no predicting it either.
No, there's no predicting it. And I think you want to, I think in my position, you want to set yourself up. So if something happens, you can respond and your designs will look beautiful in a physical product. And I think, that those kinds of things you can think about and plan for. But I think we're even seeing today now, like some of the properties that are starting to come up and do some business at retail were never conceived with that. And they just hit a moment that kids and families found it magical and paid attention. And then there was a demand. So yeah, I think it's a component that everyone, wants to have. Not everyone wants to have, but in certain instances you try to plan for, or you hope you can achieve. And then when you do, I think it is really rewarding to see kids engage with characters because they want to, bring them with them in the car and they want to take them to bed and they want them on their toothbrush. There's definitely something extremely rewarding. You've really done your job when you can hit all those markers. But I think for most, most producers and most storytellers, it's not the biggest part of the equation for sure.
There have been properties that have been on the air and hugely successful for 10 years in a row, and nobody wants to wear them on their backpacks.
Totally.
Again, no predicting.
No, and that's still a success, right? Like that's like right? If you look at the measure of success and you have a long standing series that children love and their parents are happy for them to watch, that's the real testament.
There was a show on a number of years ago that one of my sons just absolutely loved called Bucky O'Hare. And naturally they wanted all the toys. And it always upset him. And I said, well, you have all the others. And he said, you can't tell the stories without the girls. And I thought, yay me, one for the feminists got through. That being said, at your level with the younger kids, and then Seema, as you get to the older kids, do you see a drop off in the interest in the girls' characters at all? Because this is where Bucky O'Hare fit in. And I know we've all done a lot of awareness work with our kids, but do you see a difference in the way they approach the girl characters and the boy characters in popularity?
I think girl characters oftentimes are more popular than boy characters. We started at Nickelodeon many, many years ago with a show called Clarissa Explains It All, which was really the first time that a girl was in a lead and she talked directly to the camera, and she was a heroine for girls under 11. I think not unlike the sort of argument for diversity is we have to make conscious choices every day to make sure that there's a gender balance, to make sure that there's many voices at the table, to make sure that we're representing what the audience actually looks like. And I think that on the girl front, it's gotten a lot better. I think we still have to work really hard every day to make sure that we're, sort of getting it right and representing all that need to be represented and the way that they need to be represented, because kids today are very, very, very different than kids were 10 years ago and 20 years ago and 30 years ago. So the universal themes are the same. The sort of things that are happening in their lives are very, very different.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to talk about other platforms, because I know a lot of shows use YouTube, for example, to expand their reach and to get to places where they're not distributed, sometimes overseas with other countries, and sometimes just with a different audience that's not watching TV. How important are other platforms to you? Ellen, you want to go first?
Sure. I think I would include digital gaming and content like as well as the YouTube or short form video. And I think that they're crucial. It's the it goes back to the seeing, as Jennifer said, a kid take your stuffed animal or have it on their backpack and in their life that way. Everything, kids don't discriminate on platforms. They just think that the thing that they love should be where they are. And so for all of our shows, which is really just a key part of public media, we have robust websites with games and other sometimes printable activities, as well as ways to engage with community through PBS stations across the country. There are people who do station events, so kids can come out and interact with their favorite characters in walk-arounds or do activities. And those, all of that transmedia content is really important for kids to engage with their favorite world. I think that with YouTube and short form content on social media too, for that matter, but particularly for YouTube, one thing we've seen that's interesting is that for Daniel Tiger, the Daniel Tiger in Espanol is available in the US, and it does really big numbers. I never remember any of the streaming stats, but they're really good. And we also have Daniel Tiger available in other languages on YouTube, and those do really well. And that has been that was unanticipated. It just was I honestly think that it started as a geo-block fail, where it was something that was not meant for the US was actually available in the US and doing really well in the US. And so it was like, oh, well, hey, this is great. So let's make this a focus and do more of this.
Jennifer, you have that multi-level company with the digital side. How is this working for you?
Yeah, it's just such a huge part of our strategy. So with our digital and mobile gaming group, obviously they're reaching, kids of all ages, really with Toca Boca, up into the teenage years. And then for Toca Boca, actually our entertainment group did a really fun short form series for YouTube. And it just really is, that's where their audience, their player, their consumer is, also on YouTube. And that's been great. And they share it across the game. And then the other really fun thing that's happened over the last year is that people are using Toca Boca and like acting out things in the game to post to TikTok, to tell someone that they're getting married, to tell someone that they're like, there's just so much amazing creativity that this young generation, when they have the tools in their hands for storytelling, that has been, kind of really, really fun. And like this surprising thing that happened with Toca Boca, that was just, it's just been really, really fun to watch. And then on the short form side, for us, YouTube is another way to get discovered. It's another way for your audience to find you. And whether they enter through linear or a streamer or they're watching it on YouTube, they're finding you. And then they're probably going and then experiencing, if they like what they saw, then they're going and experiencing and finding that content in other places. And we do different kinds of storytelling. So something like Mighty Express, where we're having like 11 and 22-minute full stories on Netflix. We're telling shorter stories and music videos and different things that are just a little bit more snackable, that maybe when mom or dad have a tablet, they say, okay, you can have a few minutes while, before bed. So just kind of giving different experiences wherever our kids and families happen to be.
Seema, do you see any new platforms coming out on the horizon?
Yeah, I think they just keep coming. I think this audience, we can never underestimate how sophisticated the kid audience is. Yeah. And I think if they like something, they have an expectation that they're going to see it everywhere that they go. But I do think that, we went from, there's YouTube and now there's TikTok, right? There was Xbox and now there's, kids have PCs in their rooms. There was Snapchat, and then there was, Instagram. Now my son's using something called Discord, and I've never heard of it, and I'm watching him use it, and it's phenomenal. Yeah. And so I do think that it's a challenge as creators to keep up with the platforms that kids are using. And developing and fine tuning the executions for each one of those platforms, because they all come with different sets of expectations. But kids do expect what they love to be everywhere they go. So it's on us to figure out how we deliver it in each appropriately.
I'd like to get your take on what you think the future of this medium looks like, because you've all got extensive history and you've been able to look back at where it started or where you picked it up and where it was. Where do you think it's going?
I think, oh, sorry.
No, Seema, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's really hard to predict because we're in early days of all of the new platforms and the way that the consumers are using them. So each one comes with its own different brand identity that is in very early stages. So Netflix is, relatively new. Apple TV newer, and across the board, Peacock is new, and HBO Max is new. So how each one of those is gonna connect with its audience is still yet to be seen. And then you add to the mix things like Roblox and the way that kids are using Roblox and the, sort of the intersection between content and marketing and brands is a whole new set of things that we have to worry about. And there will be something that comes after TikTok and we don't even know what it is yet. So the future is hard to predict. The role of great content will remain the same with a new level of interactivity and personalization that we are yet to be able to visualize.
When I was freelancing like 20-ish years ago, I worked on a project for, I don't know if I signed an NDA, but it was a very long time ago, so I don't think it matters. But it was for Disney, ABC Cable, and it was about the future, exactly this. And it was sort of looking at the intersection of TV and internet. This was during AOL days. Mm-hmm. Like I set up my boss's AOL email when I worked on that job. That's how I can remember doing that. So it was like, they said to us, well, just imagine that you'll be able to watch TV and then there'll be a chat box and you can chat about it there in the same space. Mm-hmm. And TV shows won't be available on the broadcast schedule. You'll be able to watch them. I don't think it was said on demand. It was like, this was like the Imagineers were part of this. And it was sort of in the AOL days of the internet. It was like, what, really? And like, you could see the glimmers of it, but the technology hadn't caught up yet. So I think that, the technology is still catching up to some of the things that I heard 20 years ago as like, we'll be able to do. Right. I think that one of the other things that is interesting, going back to TikTok, is that the way that young people understand media and how to make media, like the visual literacy of TikTokers is so high. Like when you think about watching like a movie from the 20s or 30s, right? And it feels like, oh my God, that's just like, because they didn't have the same visual language that we have now. As storytellers depend on a lot of devices that we all culturally understand. And kids who are on TikTok and the next generations after seem to will have this innate understanding that is far more sophisticated than all of us, because they grew up consuming things and making things on little devices that we couldn't do. So I think that's going to be interesting to see what that does to the storytelling and the consumption of it.
Yeah, their ability to edit content in real time is like it's incredible to watch, right? And that kind of very, frenetic pace. And I think also, we can't underestimate what the last year has done to propel change forward. So even if you're looking at things like Hollywood now, and I don't think we know what the theatrical landscape is going to look like in 12 months from now, like what windows are going to look like. It is, there also has been a change because of the pandemic in an expectation of more home viewing and more readily available things and paying a premium to get something in your home at a different time or an earlier time. So I think things is kind of set in stone as theatrical windowing, all the way up to what's the next TikTok or Roblox, are like big questions. And I think Seema nailed it to say our job is to continue to, flex and try to understand these platforms so we can bring our characters to life in different ways wherever the audience happens to be in a few years from now and beyond.
Well, this has been really wonderful, and it's great for me to know that I've met 3 of the women who are creating nostalgia for the next generation. Because someday everybody's going to think back and go, gee, you remember this show or that show? In the same way that people go, I remember Mr. Rogers when I was a kid. So this is really wonderful. It's a measure of importance that I don't think much of primetime TV has. So it has been an absolute delight to meet you all. And I'm sure that our audience is equally thrilled. So Seema, Ellen, Jennifer, thank you so very much for taking the time to share your wisdom with us.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for watching. I'm Catherine Clinch. Bye-bye.